I'm sure everybody knows about Charlie Brown. If you haven't seen the program on television at some point, you may not have caught the VHS tapes that float around at bargain bins in the United States. If not, then you might have seen it in a classroom, as teachers love to show the family-friendly television programming to their students. It was late in August of 2013 that I came across a particularly strange episode of The Charlie Brown Show, a VHS slipcase that was for The Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown, as a Halloween episode many people are familiar with. It was in my grandparents' attic, which I found while I was staying in their room in Minneapolis. I have heard that Charles Schulz, the creators of Peanuts, grew up in Minneapolis and just a few miles from the summer home. The actual VHS inside, the tape was blank and very old, with the marker scrolling "It's GPCB Take 2. And for some Japanese or Chinese characters underneath it seemed to be printed out of some sort of strange ink block. What was strange is that whoever did this drew a pumpkin and an apple blossom some tree beneath those letters that signed with the initials TD. After some research, I found out that there was people in or around the 20th Century Fox or anything associated with those companies that have not worked on this episode with those initials. It all seems some sort of strange. I posted in a few forums about the episode but got no responses as to what the episode could be about. I don't own a VHS to digital video converter, so there was no way to put the episode onto the computer. Weirdly enough, the real title was "It's Your First Kiss, Charlie Brown." Many of those VHS tapes were promos for shows at the beginning, but this one looked like it was a rough cut. I heard of the usual Peanuts theme as Charlie Brown walked out of his house with a baseball cap on. Something seemed a little bit odd about the show, as some weird black lines sprawled up from the corners of the screen that looked like spider legs. It was very distracting, but I assumed that maybe the episode was meant to start as a dream sequence. But as the sky was orange, the camera then crawls up and moves right away to a very jerky and forced manner, as through a huge mats printing out animators were used to be forcibly out of the frame. Snoopy was at one for transparency, eating a bag of peanuts. He looked very nauseated, as though there's something in this water bowl is making him ill. The little bird, I don't remember his name, had been seen lay on the floor with his legs in the air, as if thought it might have been dead, which it could have been bizarre. But one leg was twitching spasmodically as the camera cut to a Snoopy carving a pumpkin. It was a serious graphicness to the pumpkin carving, which seemed to be more stylized than the usual simple animation style. Snoopy carved a pumpkin that resembled Charlie Brown's head, then put a candle inside the pumpkin. The video stopped there and froze, and I heard the Peanuts theme playing in several keys. Being hit wrong, I thought to myself as a professional paintist, and that I could tell that many of the notes were being hit a few notes over for some reason, and it didn't seem international. Snoopy carved into Charlie Brown's face and put a candle inside and left the pumpkin there. A lapse then showed the pumpkin slowly withering and rotting and decaying and dying as the candle burned away Charlie Brown's facial features, leaving a skeletal pumpkin that soon became covered in flies and rotted down to nothing. The next scene just showed Charlie Brown heading to school with the line near the path, as though the rest of the scene had never happened. Charlie Brown was missing a shoe and his leg was brown colored, very specific detail. I noticed that it was weird as that he knocks at the front door of the school before he's invited in. I never heard of someone knocking to enter the school. Charlie Brown sits next to Linus and takes out his own paper bag lunch. All of a sudden, Charlie Brown's eyes grow exceptionally wide. "There she is," he says. "The girl with the red hair." Indeed, Charlie Brown's school crush was the major plot of Good Points as the show addressed. "I bet one day," Charlie Brown started, "I'll go up to her and approach her and I'll do something to impress her and she'll kiss me." The cartoon hearts bubbled up around Charlie Lee Brown while he held his hands together and leaned into them, smiling. He looked a bit off. Linus was holding his blanket, and there was a picture of the United States scrawled in for some reason. I don't know, Charles, man. I mean, well, boys in our case shouldn't get romanticized with such things. That was weird, as I never heard anyone refer to Charlie Brown as Charles in the show before. The red-haired girl crossed the room like some sort of ghastly manner as Charlie Brown opened a paper bag lunch, which contained a peanut butter sandwich with peanuts and highly stylized drawing of George Washington Carver. Interior of the peanuts on the cover. Charlie Brown seemed to be a little different in the next scene. He looked pretty grizzled, maybe slightly older. He has some dust on his face, and that looks like a little bit of a beard of stubble. The room is full of puddles, and puddles full of water were there, and there were dead flies everywhere. The plants near the window were dead too. Charlie Brown walks up to his teacher, and the usual brass noises that are made, but Charlie couldn't understand them. What? He said, to the sound of the off-key trumpet or trombone. Indeed, Charlie Brown couldn't understand. I think it might have been some sort of learning difficulty, Charlie said, looking at his shoes sadly. Pigpen then walked up. She said something was in the water and making everyone ill, and we need to drink bottled water for the next 2 weeks. That is something weird at the time that the peanut stagnation, bottled water was not even in circulation yet. The label wasn't there, especially drawn, but it looked like kind of off of Zephyr Hill's bottle. Charlie Brown then went into a shed with a broken window and took out a notebook. He had seen the girl with red hair drop it that morning, but he couldn't get in, close enough to reach her. Her heart skipped a beat when he read that what was written. June 24th, 1967. There's probably a boy at school I find really handsome. I think his name is Charlie. When I saw him smile at me for the first time across the cafeteria, I wanted nothing more than to hug him and maybe plant my lips on him, and he can smell my hair while All of a sudden, there was the same loud bang, and it was the sound of a rock hitting the shed. What are you doing in there? It was Lucy. I guess all the kids were supposed to be playing football, as Lucy was shown squeezing a football. Hurry up, you fuss budget, she yelled. That's weird that a grown Asian businessman is walking down, making in the background. From what I do know about the show is that you never saw adult characters' heads, so I was confused that something was terrible. The grown Asian man then started to walk and talk to the brass startled up, but the camera immediately cut to right on the screen as the kids were playing football. Lucy lined up with the football for Charlie Brown to kick it, and there was a common gag. Whenever Charlie went to kick the football, Lucy would just pull it away and Charlie will kneel over. Okay, ready? Charlie Brown ran towards the football, just as Lucy would pull it away, and he continued to run to the field. What are you doing, Charlie Brown? Linus asked. He saw the redhead girl climbing out onto the bus and onto the field. He chased her across the field just as the bus pulled away, leaving him there alone. No one was even there, Charlie Brown, Linus said. Charlie sighed. A rock hit his head, rather hard. As Lucy had thrown it all of his head, I guess she didn't get the satisfaction of pulling the football away. Ow! Charlie yelled, and blood began to drip down his head. What was that? Yelled Linus Van Pellet. Evidently, none of the characters in the Peanuts universe seemed to have known what the blood was. Charlie then put his head over the wound as Lucy opened the first aid kit and found nothing inside. The next scene showed Charlie Brown's head stitched shut with what looked like same stitches used on baseballs. I have to find that red-haired girl, Charlie said. I'm running out of time. He looked at his wristwatch and then looked at the drawn time. 8:16 a.m. There is a shot of Snoopy and the Red Baron, but he was in a B-29 bomber for some reason. The next shot was all the kids seemed to be at a school dance. Charlie was fumbling around with the crowd, trying to get to the red-haired girl. She turned around behind the fruit punch bowl. I'm going to approach her, Charlie said. Linus was shown holding a massive ochre book that he had checked out from the library. "I figured it out, Charlie," he said, sucking his thumb. "There is a demon from the Japanese folklore called the Yurna Onna. This demon takes the form of what you want the most." Charlie didn't seem to be listening. "Once it finds you, Charlie walks up to the girl at the fruit punch bowl and circled around her. But she kept turning around and couldn't get a view of her face. "Don't touch her, Charlie Brown," his childhood friend screamed, but Charlie wasn't listening. "It's just a projection of your mind, Charles. It's something you think you want, and it will kill you." A next shot of Linus was going up to another grown Asian man was shown. This time as he talked, I heard the off-kilter brass. It slowly began to roll back as if an orchestra was getting to tune. I heard the words, "I have become deaf, destroyer of worlds." An explosion rocked the building, and bright lights shot outside. I guess it was meant to be the fireworks. There was a fruit punch all over the floor, but it looked like blood. Charlie Brown then tripped over it, and as you fell, you saw a halo that he said through the door right tape before and recut. Now Charlie was running through a field, unfamiliar to everyone that I remembered seeing in the show. He chased the redhead girl away, out onto the field while the pictures of her feet, hair, broken light bulbs, skulls, and baseball bats were carved into trees. The trees became more and more narrow, representing a hallway after a while. Charlie Brown had to squeeze through. There was what could have been blood, fruit punch, or rather some sort of forging material, which Charlie Brown had completely covered in as he chased the girl with red hair through the snowy area. "I don't have much time," he thought. "I'm getting old. I have to get that kiss. I have to reach her. I have to..." He chased the redhead girl through the snow, before realizing he was lost in the forest outside of whatever town in Peanuts was supposed to be in. Charlie's eyes widened heavily and disturbingly as the picture distorted down. The widened and became more and more intense. The silly putty pressed onto the Peanuts comic strip began to slowly and contorted to match someone's wrapped image. They wiggled and they waved as they were through underwater, as he came off to a steep cliff, overlooking a lake. There was a red wig stuck to the bloodied stump. He then chased this beautiful red-haired girl, before she turned around, revealing two bright demonic eyes, which they pierced through the low quality of the editing of the Peanuts tape, before she fell backwards down into the water as Charlie tried to grab her shoulder. Charlie Brown, the kisses and the broken dove shoveled in the pool in the attempt to rescue of what he thought it was her. He dove deep down into the water, pulling her up as she coughed up water and blood. Although she was unconscious, he went to kiss her, but she reeled back in horror, like a deer in the red lights. Was he so abhorrent of creature? He withdrew and then went in again. His lips pressed to lip as he blew into the lungs, sending her coughing up blood. And as she became conscious and kissed him, they both kissed there, and for hours on end. It seemed that time lamps showing hours passing and apple blossoms falling from the nearby trees. Bright light bulbs shunned both their eyes as they exploded into the background. I thought it was the end of this bizarre episode, as the screen faded. But the final shot was more stylized. It was very realistic. "Have you seen me?" drawing was stuck into a poster on the wall of the school with the picture of Charlie Brown on it. "We don't go missing like this," Linus said with a sigh. It just doesn't happen. I just want to know if it really happened to my best friend." A shot of flashlights resembling the search party to look up the final few segments of the shot before the camera zoomed in through the trees to a lake. There was a shot of a toothless Charlie Brown laying there, frozen blue, dead. His teeth were shown and buried in some rotted carved stump with red hairs around it. His shirt was torn and there were visible lacerations around his neck. There were X's in his eyes, but not cartoon X's. They looked like stitches. Dirty brown leaves surrounded him, and his hand was ripped a heart Valentine card. And his heart was there was nothing. And that, my little pretties, was It's Your First Kiss, Charlie Brown. A Peanuts Charlie Brown Lost episode creepypasta written by Johnie the Pastebin. Bin Man, yeah. My final thoughts on this story? Well, I actually have to say it was a pretty good story. I'm not going to deny that one bit. I mean, yeah, there were cliches in the story, such as, the blood and all that, Charlie Brown dying at the end and all that. I mean, it's a pretty good episode for what this story really is. Like, I mean, I'm not going to lie right now. It's a pretty good Charlie Brown creepypasta where basically it's about him, seeing this girl that he wanted to kiss. And I mean, I think this is an alternative episode version of, it's your first kiss, Charlie Brown. I mean, it's a pretty good creepypasta for what this one is. I mean, it's a really well made of how this story went out. I mean, it's basically kind of like the same thing, except, the red hair girl is nothing else more than I guess you could say a demon. But I mean, the demon cliche, I mean, I would, call out saying, oh my goodness, why would there be a demon in there? But for some reason, I understand that this is an older story, so I'm willing to give an excuse on it because it's an older story. So maybe that's why. I think it's an older story. Like, I remember hearing Dave the Useless narrate this story back a couple years ago, along with gory parodies and some Marnie gamers. I mean, I think a few other people did narrate this story as well. So I thought, I'll give him my thoughts. I mean, the grammar was pretty good for what it is. Like, the grammar is well written as well as the sentence structuring. I do like the concept of how it all went out and all. However, though, I would have to say there are parts of it that didn't really make a whole lot of sense, especially with this girl, the redhead girl that, Charlie Brown want to kiss is basically a demon. I mean, I didn't think the demon thing was necessary, but for some reason it just somewhat worked. So it's most likely Charlie Brown is hallucinating in a sense. If that makes any sense to you guys, I'm pretty sure that would make a lot more sense. Maybe it might be just me, but that's from what I do know personally. Now, I think this story, I mean, pardon me about that, I'm a bit tired. I mean, yeah, the story was not a terrible one. I mean, it does have a pretty interesting concept, and I do like how everything went out about this story. It's a pretty good one. So, I really do have to say, still a really well made story for what it is. It's still it's a pretty good one for this story. I mean, it's a pretty damn good story for what this is. I mean, yeah, I mean, there was parts of the story that didn't really make a whole lot of sense, but for some reason this story actually managed to make it, more sense in the matter. I mean, it's a pretty good story for what this is. I mean, yeah, there were parts of the story that didn't really make a whole lot of sense, but for some reason they're actually pretty good. So, with that being said, and with that being the case, I actually found this story to be, quite enjoyable. Like, I like the concept, I like the grammar, the sentence structuring, everything about this. But I think if I have to say one thing, I would have to say that I wasn't really particularly a fan of would have to be what was it? Oh yeah, probably the part that there was like some what was it? Oh yeah, some the demon part about it, when we see, this girl is most likely a demon and all that. I think it just didn't really make sense, and plus it didn't really help out a lot, but for some reason it actually did. So there's definitely that. I mean, yeah, it's not a terrible story, I'm not going to lie. It actually had provided somewhat detail, although it is messed up, to be completely honest. Maybe that might be just me, but maybe you guys might have something else and like a different opinion personally. But I didn't find this one to be a bad story. I don't think it's a bad one. I actually think it's a pretty good story. And, it's my opinion. And if you disagree with me, That's perfectly fine too, as we're all entitled to our own opinions regards to these creepypastas. This is just simply my own personal thoughts. My final rating of this story would have to be, I guess guess I'm gonna give this one a 10 out of 10. It was a pretty good creepypasta. It was definitely well made, and it did have a pretty good concept and time and effort into the story. I mean, I really like this concept. It's pretty good, and I recommend you guys go check out this story if you haven't. You guys will probably find this one to be enjoyable. It's a pretty good creepypasta. I did find this on the Spin Pasta Wiki, so that was where I narrated this. So, to the offer, you did get a pretty good job with this story. So, with that being said, what did you guys think about this creepypasta? Did you all enjoy it? Did you all not? Also, what we have done personally to help make this story a lot better? Feel free to leave me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below. I'm the Queen of Lions. Thank you so much for watching today's episode. And if you're brand new here to this channel, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe because I make brand new videos every single day. Don't forget to ring the notification bell to when I upload, so that way you guys will not miss an upload. And as always, please roll the outro because I'm out.